Shalom. We're continuing with Sefer Malachim. At this point, we've reached the point where both Yeravam and Rechavam died. But remember, Rechavam died before Yeravam, because they both began their reigns at around the same time. But Rechavam only had 17 years, and Yeravam had, just 1 second, had 22 years. So when Rechavam died, Yeravam is still ruling. So that's why Perek Tesvav begins, Ubishmaina Esrei Shana Lemelech Yeravam ben Nevat. It was the 18th year of Yeravam, because Rechavam ruled 17 years. So when Aviam, the son of Rechavam, became king on Yehuda, it was already the 18th year of Yeravam. So this is Aviam, the son of Rechavam in Yehuda. Shalai Shanim Malach b'Yushalayim. Aviam was a king for 3 years. V'shem Imai Ma'acha Bas Avishalim. So we say that Aviam was the son of Rechavam, and Aviam's mother, as one of Rechavam's wives, we don't know how many wives Rechavam had, was Ma'acha, the daughter of Avishalom. Avishalom is not Avshalom, this is a separate name, and indeed it is brought down that although the Minhag Yisrael is not to name a child Avshalom, because Avshalom was the Rasha that was married against David, nevertheless Avishalom is a separate name, and as far as we know, Avishalom we don't know anything about, so we don't know that he's a Rasha, and therefore it's considered to be a legitimate name. And in Hilchos Gittin, it is very important to know if somebody was named Avshalom, Keneged the Minhag, or Avishalom, because those are two different names, and a wrong spelling would actually might make the get puzzle. Now, unfortunately, Aviam was no better than Rechavam, Malcha Yehuda, Vayelech b'chol chatois aviv sherasa lefanav. He followed the sinful ways of Rechavam. He was not shalem, he was not perfect in walking with God like the heart of David, his father. His father, he means his ancestor. Because the emes is, the only reason why there is any Malchus in Yehuda at all, Hashem would have taken everything away from Yehuda, was only in the merit of David. Ki leman David, Nasan Hashem Elokav lo nir b'Yerushalayim. It was only for the sake of David that Hashem gave him a nir. Now nir means ner, a candle, a remnant in Yerushalayim. Lahakim es b'nai Achrav, to allow his son and his descendants afterwards, lahamid es Yerushalayim, to be able to establish their malchus in Yerushalayim. And that is because of the merit of David. Asher asa David es hayasher b'einei Hashem. David did all that was upright in the eyes of Hashem. V'lo sor mikol asher tzivo kol yemei chayav. He did not depart from everything that Hashem commanded him his entire life. And David's only chait, rak bidvar Uriah Hachiti. It was only the sin of taking Bathsheba from her husband, Uriah Hachiti. Uriah Hachiti does not mean he was a Ches, but he lived in the territory of Ches. Now again, without going over the story again, we know that Chazal say, anyone that said that David truly sinned is making a mistake. Technically, he was not with a married woman. She had received a get. And although David sent Uriah to his death in Milchama, Uriah was in fact Chayav Misa because he rebelled against the king. He was a married b'malchus. So everything that David did was technically according to halacha, but his machshava was to take the woman away from the husband that would have remarried her. And therefore that chait remains a chait of David HaMelech. And as we had said before, Milchama Haisa ben Rechavam ben Yeravam kol Mechayav, the war, the skirmishes between Rechavam and Yeravam continued under the reign of Aviam. And we don't have a lot to say about Aviam. We simply say, yes, Divrei Aviam, B'chol asher asa, If you want to know everything else about Aviam, once again, we're not going to go over the history here. Halo heim kesuvim al sefer divrei hayamim l'malchei Yehuda, and milchama haisa ben Aviam and ben Yeravim. All we can say is that Aviam's reign, he continued fighting against Yeravim. Vayishkav Aviam im avaisa v'yikbru oso be'ir David v'yimloch asa b'nai tachsa. And Aviam was succeeded by his son, that was Asa, and Asa is going to be the next king of Yehuda. Okay, so now, as I said before, it's a little confusing because we're moving back and forth from Malchus Yehuda to Malchus Yisrael, and the kings overlap. So now, Bishas Esrim li Yeravam ben Nevat. Yeravam is still around when Asa becomes king. It is the 20th year of Yeravam. Yeravam is going to rule 22 years. So Yeravam overlaps with Rechavam and with Aviam and with the beginning of the reign of Asa. Yeravam will die during the reign of Asa. So it was the 20th year of Yeravam. Asa becomes the Melech of Yehuda. But Asa will live much longer than Yeravam at this point. Arboim bi'achas shana malach b'Yushalayim. That Asa is going to be a king for 41 years. Now here it says, difficult pasuk, V'shem imo, the name of Asa's mother is Macha bas Avishalom. Now here, the question is very, very obvious. We were told in Pasuk Beis of the same parak that it was Aviam, whose mother was Macha bas Avishalom, which would actually mean that Macha bas Avishalom is Asa's paternal grandmother. So why are you calling Macha his mother if it is his grandmother? So the Mefarshim explain, the Metzudas David says, that basically Asa was raised by his grandmother because his mother had died young. So we actually don't know his mother's name. We don't know Aviam's wife's name, and therefore we attribute Asa's upbringing to his paternal grandmother. But interestingly enough, we finally have some bright news here. Vayas Asa hayashor b'einei Hashem. Asa is a righteous king. He does what is upright in the eyes of God. Ki David Aviv, just like David, his ancestor, he walked in the ways of David. Vayaver hakedeshim min haaretz. He removed the prostitution from the land. Vayosar eskol hagit. Now, when I say the land, this is not all of Eretz Yisrael. There is still Avodah Zarah among the 10 tribes, but in Eretz Yehuda, he removed the prostitution and he removed the idolatry. Vayosar eskol hagilulim, all of the idols. Asher asu avaisav. V'gam esmacha imai, and even his own mother, which means his own grandmother, who herself was an Ovedas Avodah Zarah, Vayisireha migvira. He removed her from her royal offices. He didn't kill her, but she was removed from being part of the monarchy, and the reason is Asher Asa Mifletzes Liashera. Mifletzes, she had made an appendage to an Asherah. Again, this is a bit of an enigmatic phrase, but essentially what this means is, a little difficult to explain, she attached something that would be like a piece of wood, like a stick, to the Asherah, resembling a male organ, and she would be niveles to the Asherah. I mean, it's not really bia, but she would go through the pu'ula of being niveles to the Asherah, such a horrendous thing. Vayichrais Asa es miflatzta. Asa destroyed that appendage. Vayisraif, and the Avodah Zarah was burnt. Benachal Kidron, in the Kidron Valley. That's the valley between Yerushalayim, the old city today, and the Mount of Olives. and he burnt it in Nachal Kidron. However, even Asa could not do everything, and that is habamais loisaru. He could not get rid of the bamais. Now, this does not mean the bamais for Avodah Zarah. That he did get rid of, but people were still building bamais, private altars, and bringing korbanos. And although bamos were permitted before the Beis HaMikdash was built, once you have the Beis HaMikdash, bamos are asher di'araisa. That's called shechutei chutz, shechting a korban outside of the Mikdash, even for Hashem, and halah b'chutz. So this is Asa's one failure. He removed the prostitution, and he removed the Avodah Zarah, and he destroyed the Avodah Zarah, and even members of the royal house, his own grandmother, he demoted and removed her from royalty. But the one thing he could not get rid of is he could not get rid of the bamais that are l'shem shamayim. But it does say, levav Asa haya shalem im Hashem kol yamav. But Asa's heart and Asa's kavanah for the 41 years of his reign was shalem with Hashem. Vayavei es kodshei aviv, v'kodshei beis Hashem, kesev v'zohav v'kelim. And he took the various things that his father may have dedicated for Avodah Zarah, and he was able to donate them for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kesev, zohav, and kelim. Now, umilchama, again, these are skirmishes, these are not full wars. Umilchama haisa bein Asa bein Basha melech Yisrael kol yameim. There was war between Asa and Basha, the king of Israel. Now, this is a little shver, because we haven't been introduced to Basha yet, because the last king we know of Malchi Yisrael is Nadav, the son of Yeravam, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Nadav ruled for a very short time, and Basha took over, and during Asa's reign in Yehuda, that's when they had their skirmishes. Vayal Basha Melech Yisrael Yehuda, even as Harama, that we are told that Basha Melech Yisrael, who was after Nadav ben Yeravam, attacked Eretz Yehuda. Vayiven es Harama, he built a very tall platform to be able to climb over the walls of Yerushalayim. Levilti tes yotzeu ba liasa melech Yehuda, and he besieged the city of Yerushalayim, so nobody could leave and nobody could come in. And what did Asa do? Vayikach Asa is called Kesev Vazav Hanaisarim B'Aitzes Beis Hashem. Asa took all of the gold and the silver that still remained in the Beis Hashem. Now remember, a lot of it had been plundered by Shishak Melech Mitzrayim, but whatever was left over, he took it, as well as the Eitzres Beis HaMelech and whatever treasure of the Beis HaMelech. Vayitneim biyad avadav, vayishlachem HaMelech Asa. So all of this wealth, Asa took, and he sent them as a payment to Ben Hadad, Ben Tavriman, Ben Chezyon, who was Melech Aram. He was the king in Syria. Hayoshev b'Damesek, who was in Damascus. In other words, essentially, he is paying Ben Hadad to help him repel Basha Melech Yisrael. And he says, Bris beini ubeinecha, we have a covenant, bein avi ubein avicha, between my father and your father. Hine sholachti lecha sheichat, he calls it a bribe. I'm sending you a bribe of kesev v'zahav. Lech hafeira es brischa es Basha Melech Yisrael v'yaleh me'alai. Again, the politics here are a little convoluted. Apparently, there was originally a peace treaty and a covenant between Malchei Yehuda and Ben Hadad, but Ben Hadad switched allegiances and made a treaty with Basha Melech Yisrael, because apparently that's more powerful. You have 10 tribes. So now that Basha is attacking Malchei Eretz Yehuda, so Asa is sending a tribute to Ben Hadad and asking him, nullify the covenant that you made with Basha, come back to us, because we were originally the people that you had a covenant with, and repel this threat against my kingdom. Vayishma, because of the sheikhad, Vayishma ben Hadad al Melech Asa, Ben Hadad listened to Asa, Vayishlach es Sarei Chayolim asher lo alari Yisrael, and he sent his army against the cities of Malchus Yisrael. Vayach es Ion, v'es Dan, v'es Avel, Beis Macha, these are cities in Malchus Yisrael. V'es kol Kinrais, al kol Eretz Naphtali, and all of the area called Kinrais in the land of Naphtali, that's around Yam Tiberia, Yam Kinneret. In fact, that's why it's called Kinneret, because the Yam Kinneret is shaped like a kinnor, so the areas around Yam Kinneret are called Kinrites. Vayehi Kishmaya Basha, when Basha hears that his own cities are under attack by Ben Hadad, so he retreats. He has to defend those cities. Vayechtal Mibnos Yisrael, he stopped building his platform to conquer the Yerushalayim. Vayesha B'Tirza, and he went back to Tirza. Vahamelech Asa Hishmias Kol Yehuda, and Melech Asa gathered together all of the Anshe Yehuda, Enoki, nobody was exempt. Vayisu es Avnei Harama v'esetzah asher bana Basha, and they disassembled. It was like a public ceremony of thanks. They disassembled the big platform and all of the wood that Basha had built to climb over the walls of the city. Vayiven bam hamelech asa es geva binyamin v'esamitzvah. So it's quite amazing. This was such a massive platform, I guess for thousands of soldiers, that Asa was able to build cities in Geva, Binyamin, and Mitzpah from the wood that was disassembled from this platform. So Asa was a righteous king. V'yeser kol divrei Asa v'chol gvuroso v'chol asher Asa, all of the exploits of Asa, ha'arim asher bana, and all of the details of the cities that he built. Halo hema kesuvim al sefer divrei hayam l'malchei Yehuda. Once again, it is in the book of Divrei Hayamim l'malchei Yehuda, but it mentions there was one little problem. Rak lies ziknaso, towards the end of his life, as he got old, chala es raglav, he had problems with his legs and his feet. So it's not really clear what the issue is. I mean, obviously when people get old, there may be different health problems. Why would there be a need to mention this? So in truth, Chazal do talk about this, and they say that there was a certain tzad aveira here, because it mentions that Asa went to the doctors, and there's a whole discussion, is it proper for a Maimin Bashem to go to a doctor? So again, the emes is, the Shulchan Aruch says beferish that not only is it okay to go to doctors, you're even chayev to go to doctors. For Rapo, Yerapeh, that the doctor is given a rishus to be merapeh is not only a rishus, but I'm even mechuyev as hishtadlus v'nishmartem od l'nafsho seichem. Nevertheless, the Ramban says if someone is a great, great tzaddik who is very great in his emunah, it might be an avla to go to a reifei, and they talk about Asa as an example of that. Vayishkav Asa im avaisav. Asa was nifter. Vayikaver im avaisa bir David. He was buried bir David Aviv. And after Asa, we now have Yehoshaphat. So far we have Rechavam, we have Avyam, we have Asa, and Yehoshaphat is going to be our fourth king. Okay. Now, once again, we go back and forth here, and we're switching back to Malchei Yisrael. And certainly Yeravam died towards the beginning of Asa's reign, and he was succeeded by Nadav, but Nadav had a very short reign. Nadav ben Yeravam, back to Malchei Yisrael, Malach al Yisrael, b'shnat shtayim li Asa, Melech Yehuda. In the second year of Asa, Yeravam died. Nadav ben Yeravam became king, but he was only king for 2 years, and he is the end of the Yeravam line. Basha will succeed him, but Basha is not from Yeravam. V'yasar Rabbeinu Hashem, Nadav was no better than Yeravam. He did evil in the eyes of God. He followed the ways of his father, not only to be a chayte, but to be a machta. Israel. It always emphasizes his sin was he was gairem other yidden to sin. And now we're introducing Basha that we've already talked about. Vayikshar olav Basha ben Achia lebeis Yisachar. So Basha, the son of Achia, not the Navi, of the tribe of Yisachar, rebelled against Nadav. Vayakeyu Basha begivson asher laplishtim. Basha assassinated Nadav in the town of Givson that had belonged to Plishtim. Perhaps it no longer belonged to the Plishtim. V'nadav v'chol Yisrael tsarim al Givson, meaning, they were trying to recapture it from the Plishtim. Vayimiseyu Basha. Basha killed Nadav, and this is the third year of Asa Melech Yehuda. Remember, Asa is going to rule for 41 years. Vayimloch tachtav. Right? So Basha becomes king during the reign of Asa. So Yeravam is gone. You had Yeravam Nadav. Yeravam's whole dynasty was himself and his son, and that was the end of it. And then it goes on and says, not only did Basha kill Nadav, but this was the fulfillment of Achia Shiloni's Nevuah, that all of the Beis Yeravam would be wiped out. Vayihi Kimalcho, when Basha became king, he eliminated all the opposition. Hika es called Beis Yeravam, Lahisher kol neshama liyeravam. There was not a single survivor of Yeravam's family, ad hishmido, until they were utterly destroyed. And this was a fulfillment, Kidvar Hashem asher diber biad avdo Achia Hashiloni. This was the prophecy of Achia Hashiloni, al chatois Yeravam asher chata, because of all of the sins of Yeravam, that not only was he chayte, but asher hichni as Yisrael, that he was machti as harabim, because so asher hichis Hashem Elokei Yisrael, and he was gairem a tremendous anger, kavyochel, on the part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, v'yeser divrei Nadav v'chol asher asa. If you want to know more about Nadav in his short reign, halo heim kesuvim al sefer divrei hayamim l'malchei Yisrael. Again, this is a non-holy book, the book of divrei hayamim for Malchei Yisrael. And again, as we said, that throughout the reign of Asa and Basha, there continued to be skirmishes and battles. Okay. And it mentions now about Basha, B'shnas Shalosh Liyasa Malach Yisrael, Melech Yehuda, Malach Basha ben Achiel Kol Yisrael, that Basha became king in the third year of the reign of Asa, and his capital was in Tirzah, and he ruled for 24 years. But again, Basha was no great tzaddik either. Vayas hara b'yeinei Hashem. And even though he killed Nadav ben Yeravam and wiped out Yeravam's dynasty, he continued to walk in the ways of Yeravam and his Yeravam sin, asher hechti es Yisrael, that caused Klal Yisrael to sin. Okay.